today's SCC match. Here we go.
Yeah, I think the best way to quickly explain it is that the only reason it was a draw is because Fabiano's king was able to hide in front of his own pawn and prevent any rook checks. Whereas if the black king was able to get in front of that H pawn, there wouldn't be anywhere that that king could hide. So maybe it was related to something like that. But regardless, a sign of things to come, because we saw Fabi looking down and out, fighting back. That was a really impressive time scramble by Fabi, because it looked like you couldn't hold it.
Yeah. And he was under 20 seconds for at least the last 20 moves, if not more. So Fabiano, like you said, he shows some experience. He's been in that position before. Lots of Speed Chess championships. He's played in every single one, for those who keep track of that type of thing. And yeah.
And we see a different type of position in this one completely. Sort of a King's Gambit, or a King's Indian rather, type of position. Bishop drops back to e3, and it's always the question, why do you play bishop g5 if after h6 you're going to retreat to e3? Like, it's such a puzzling, why not just play bishop e3 then? Well, the h-pawn means that later white's going to gain time after black castles by playing queen d2, and black will need to spend even more time to play king h7.
Love highlighting that idea. We're probably going to see exactly that on the board with queen to d2, and here comes king h7. Oh, no. Okay, a little bit of a tempo gain, but the same idea will occur. In fact, computer doesn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, bishop c2 looks like a really, really natural reaction. It's on that square compared to a knight you always want to be on, where you're covering b3, a4, d3, e4. So just a feel-good move. And you know that this is just temporary because h6 needs defense. It's either going to be king h7 or it's going to be something like g5, which has its own concessions.
Yep. And now if you put the king on h7, you're putting on a diagonal that is newly opened. White might get really aggressive with moves like f4 or others coming. So what's funny about that tempo from black is it really doesn't do a lot. And the change of the structure, I think will likely help white here in the long term. Will we see f4? Oh, yep, we do. Played right away.
F4 is a great looking move here, and the pieces for white are supremely placed, and this is exactly why you wanted to encourage the h6 move, because king h7 was not desirable with a bishop on c2. I really like this for Pragg. I think it's also a position that completely suits his play style. Also, not just f takes e5, which is a huge threat right now. The c5 knight would be loose, but even pushing the pawn forward to f5 is not something that is easy to deal with for Fabi. Like, are you going to play g5 and allow things to get weaker in that way? You certainly can't take.
Yeah, well said. You speak and I highlight. This is a good team. A lot easier to bring those ideas to life. All right. Well, as you said, white was threatening both fe and f5, so taking borderline felt like an only move, and now you've got a fun choice. You can take with the bishop on, hit d6, and then try to do some fun stuff. But you could also take with the knight and consider. Yeah, so Pragg does take with the knight. There has to be some tactics at some point coming in the air here. Whoa! Wow! We've had 2 games, Amon, and 2 only moves suggested by the computer that were retreating knight moves. I'm going to bet that Pragg doesn't play this move here. Just calling it on a limb that I don't know that he's going to play that move.
That's a bet which will pay you absolutely nothing. Knight e2 would just be shocking. I mean, if there's a guy to find it, it's Pragg. But I mean, rook a to e1, bishop d4, these moves all look very natural. Just adding some support to the bishop or moving it out of the way, because it's a piece that's just been attacked by rook e8. But I think that knight e2, this strange retreat, just has to do with the f7 pawn and trying to actively prevent knight f6 to e4, which might generate a lot of trades, and maybe the follow-up would be pawn f5 after that, and everything is under control. That's the weak point in the position. So what an amazing retreating move to play against this idea of knight e4. But as I said, bishop d4, Danny was looking way too logical.
Yeah, and also rook a1. Now, again, as you highlighted, we have the benefit of the computer and 2 talking heads here, so it's easier for us to be like, yeah, knight e2, once we see it recommended by the computer, makes sense. But such a hard move to play. And so, again, if you're just tuning in, we had a similar game, or not a very different position, but there was a retreating knight move that the computer said was the only move for Fabi to maintain the edge in game 1, and Fabi didn't find that either. Pragg did not find this one. And to your point, Amon, knight e4 is now on the board. Black is actually simplifying and defending everything here because f7 is not attacked.
Yep. So this is a definite achievement. Now, that being said, I need to see how this game plays out in the next couple moves, because there's something about White's position that I do still like. You can be very solid with either b3 or perhaps queen to c3. Queen b6 has been played. And I mean, if it's a mistake or a miss, you know that it has to do with bishop to d4, because, you know, that's clearly the idea. And not played. Well, Danny, I don't know if you want to
move that would have been.
I don't know
we
if
got
you
to
want to
back
go
up and
back.
show. Yeah, we have to show that. Bishop to d4 would have been absolutely wild. First of all, if the queen takes, White can trade, and at the end of the line, you can move the knight to attack the rook while also threatening rook takes f7. So this was the idea, everybody. And if the rook takes, even though there's a discovery, I'm assuming the move is just queen f2. Okay, yeah, that looks like what the computer would have said, and this is just winning for White.
Oof.
Wow.
Yeah, that would be really, really unpleasant to see. But obviously, just a routine check. It looks like the only move to, you know, do anything different than king h1 is just hanging your piece again. So why bother? And he just doesn't give it more thought. So a really human series of moves there, both queen b6 and king h1. But you know, that's why the engines are there to remind us there's always something else to consider.
It's crazy to me that we've had 3 only moves that could have changed games, and they were all retreating moves, Amon. This bishop retreating move, infamously known as maybe the hardest move to find in chess, this sort of backward bishop. But also 2 backward knight moves. So I don't know what it says about today, but we've got an odd universe ahead if we're going to see retreating moves all day that the human players playing so far have not found a single one of them. Again, no judgment. These are like crazy moves, but wild to see.
Yep, and if the rook doubles, like rook a to e8, you always have to give thought to knight e6, which is a great interposing move, just going right in the middle of everything. And of course, if the pawn would take, then the e4 rook would be hanging. So knight e6 is the reason why we're not seeing an automatic double.
Yeah, Fabi taking his time, ultimately trades. Now the queen takes with all kinds of fun ahead if queen e7 happens. And what if rook e8? What's his idea? I guess queen c3 check, maybe. Just simple.
Yep. And I mean, you talk about simple, queen c3, queen f6, and take your pick of where you want to drop that knight. Knight takes g6, knight h5, knight e6. Open up the rook and the queen on the f file, and the queen on b6 is looking like a non-participant, you know, just a spectator on the queen side.
Yeah. It's funny how that check could have been met by a devastating bishop retreat earlier, but even though it wasn't, the queen still feels out of place. The black king is sort of faking protection now, right? It looks safe, but in reality, there are 3 pieces ready to gang up, and there are no pieces really ready to defend the leader over here. So Fabi taking time for good reason. And by the way, this is even bigger time advantage than Pragg had in game 1, almost 2 minutes on the clock.
Yep. Yeah, this is quite serious here. Queen c3 is very annoying, but so is queen e7. So I was almost thinking of queen d8 in that position, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if knight g6 even works now, but queen f6 and then knight g6. I mean, how do you defend f7, right? You kind of have to play like rook f8, but then there's knight g6, so it's really, really tough.
Let's bring the analysis board to show why queen d8 doesn't work, because I want to show it before it's played. The threat is knight h5. The problem here is on queen d8, White's going to play knight h5, threatening checkmate. If you take fork count on f6, and if you take h5,
it's just going. Not knight h5, but queen d8 is on the board. This line is amazing, Danny, and I'm basically looking at 1 minute and 45 seconds on the clock, and Pragg is the number 1 candidate to find something like this.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, as I showed in the line, knight h5 and queen f7's come. No engine moves. You're just calculating. He finds it. It's brilliant. Prague's going to go on to win the first game in this match.
Unbelievable, Danny. What a call out to show that line, because it just is exactly what we've seen right here, and it's resignation. What a victory from Pragg there.